This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for your online store, marketing tools to develop your own website and much more.
History is written by the victors. We've all heard this sentence at least once while discussing historical matters, and we often just shrug it off as being irrelevant to the topic at hand, or we just tell ourselves, well, it is what it is. But is it? How much truth does this sentence hold? Is it true that the historical accounts we base our academic understanding on are in fact nothing but a one-sided perspective on a series of past events? And if so, wouldn't that make the whole endeavor we call history biased and therefore fundamentally flawed? If history books are just what the victors want us to know, how can we trust them? How can we know the truth of what actually happened in the past of our species? Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and in order to understand this, we should, in my opinion, first divide two fundamental core elements to this discussion: history as a professional academic subject based on hard evidence, and propaganda. The sentence "history is written by the victors" does hold some truth, in the sense that propaganda, national perspective and personal perspective are often intertwined in the accounts we use as primary and secondary sources. See the De Bello Gallico by Julius Caesar, specifically designed to be read by the Senate of Rome to both bolster the name of Caesar and his reputation as a successful legatus and leader, to bring glory to Rome, to justify his Gallic wars, and most importantly, to threaten with a very detailed and probably exaggerated description of the mighty legions and incredible soldiers at his command. During the Roman period alone, we've got multiple sources either inflating enemy army numbers or giving us a description of a culture that we now know to be incorrect. And a similar thing happened with Emperor Justinian, who had historians of the time produce historical works which had as a main purpose that of praising his name. Look at, for example, the numerous accounts written by medieval Christian monks, which describes the Norse warriors and Vikings as quote-unquote demons. Clearly, one cannot help but understand the perspective of the clergymen and their opinion on the Norse at the time, considering, for example, the very famous episodes such as the attack on Lindisfarne in 793. And clearly that's because of the direct experience that these monks had with them, either as a first-hand source or a second-hand source. But different people in different parts of the world and in different times will give you completely different descriptions of the Norse, as raiders, as warriors, as traders. And clearly, if we read Norse records of the time, you'll understand the perspective will be diametrically opposite. Another example are the Spanish reports of the conquistadors as they describe the Aztec population. We know that those are clearly exaggerated and had a specific agenda. They were crafted to depict these people in the worst light possible, to justify the interests of the conquistadors. However, some people at the time already recognized that and pointed this out, and we have this in the historical record. It's not like everyone believes everything. Another similar example are the sort of records and descriptions made by, for example, the British colonial troops as they were entering Africa and describing the populations that they were encountering. Reading some of these accounts, one cannot help but notice that what they're trying to do is trying to represent the African natives and depict them as savages, to reaffirm their position as bringers of civilization instead of just conquerors. On a wider spectrum and on a more general sense, we could say that many kingdoms and empires and nations have tried to bring forth their own perspective and place that as truth into the historical record. It is in fact very difficult to remove such a filter when you write. To the ancient Romans, the Gauls were uncivilized barbarians that needed to be civilized by Rome and pay taxes. From the perspective of the Gauls, the Romans were a bane and a dreadful people invading their lands that needed to be stopped at all costs. Going even deeper than that, on a personal level, to the mother of a Roman soldier, the Gauls were scary barbarians, they are trying to kill my son. From the point of view of the mother of a Gallic warrior, it's the exact opposite. But simply because, quite often, the sources are written with a filter, that doesn't mean that history as a whole can only be read with that filter on. It doesn't mean that history as a professional subject is written by the victors. The accounts are, not history.
Alright, and now I'd like to take a moment to mention the sponsor that made this video possible, Squarespace. Do you like blogging? You want to create your own online store? You always wanted to have your own website but don't know how to do all of these things? Then Squarespace is the perfect platform for you, as it makes all of these things extremely easy to do. And once you are done making your site, you can add a fully configurable share button connected to all the major social media platforms. And that's not it. With Squarespace you can do many more things. Say you wanted to gather monetary support to work on a project of yours. Squarespace allows you to do just that. And the donations are extremely easy to do too, as they can be done through PayPal, Stripe, Apple Pay and Venmo, so you don't have to worry about anything but creating. Moreover, if you're a content creator like me, you can also make members-only content and manage and communicate with each single one of your members. The built-in email campaign system lets you engage with your audience as you share your products or blogs with them. This way, since you're going to create content as you interact with your supporters, it's going to be a lot easier to produce content they like. So, what are you waiting for? Head to squarespace.com and get your free trial today. Once you're done with your free trial, go to squarespace.com/Metatron and use the code Metatron to get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. And big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring my video. The job of a historian is to find out what the actual objective truth is. In order to do that, he or she will put all of these accounts together, reading all sides, cross-referencing the written record with the archaeological findings or material evidence, with the statuary and iconographic evidence, trying to depict the most accurate picture possible. So, in reality, yes, some historical accounts do have a certain level of bias. Some are in fact written by the victors, although that's not always the case. But history as a whole, history as an academic subject, is not written by the victors. History books are created by cross-reference evidence and the unbiased, as much as humanly possible, interpretation of that evidence. In other words, history is written by historians on account of what evidence suggests. Also, on a similar note, it's not entirely true that the defeated in a war never leave a record for us to read. There are examples of records written by those who were on the defeated side. But even in a situation of a war of annihilation or a genocide, stones, buildings, bronzes, tablets, steles, statues, manuscripts, these all speak to us from the dust. It is in fact extremely difficult to delete an entire civilization off the record. Traces will remain, and those traces will be analyzed. So what if the history book that you have been given was in fact altered? What if the texts you have access to are failing to represent an unbiased and real subsequence of events? Research. We are extremely blessed and fortunate to live in an era where research and data is readily available through the means of the internet. Never before has it been this comparatively easy to challenge the so-called facts that we find in all sorts of publications. Although by doing research, I mean do actual professional research. Opening a couple of random sites and calling that research is a misnomer. That is in fact the core principle of academic research, is to challenge established ideas once new evidence is presented. And mind you, most publications in our day and age that have any academic credibility have been peer-reviewed. A good historian, and for that matter a good researcher, is always ready to be challenged. In fact, he's ready to challenge himself, herself, because the only thing that really is important in the field of research is to figure out the truth, not to bolster the agenda of the victors. Not to mention that the sentence "history is written by the victors" sort of implies that all historical books and documents have been written after a major war has come to an end. That's not always the case. It is, however, also important to acknowledge the fact that it has happened that some important historical leaders have tried to manipulate the historical record to their advantage, and have done so having, for instance, history books burnt, while having new ones completely rewritten with censored or fabricated stories in their stead. One example of this is the Aztec emperor Itzcoatl, but there are many others. According to the Florentine Codex in 1430, Itzcoatl, 4th emperor of the Aztecs, ordered the burnings of all pictographic codices, in which the early history of the Aztecs was recorded. This allowed the early Aztec states to develop a state-sanctioned history and mythos. Thing is though, that usually when this happens, we find out. Just like in this case, we know. The simple fact that it has happened in the history of mankind that historical sources get tainted by leaders, propaganda, personal perspective, and limitations of the time in which they are written doesn't invalidate history as a whole. Research, in fact, is always the counter to any form of misinformation. So, the next time someone uses the phrase, history is written by the victors, please keep in mind the things we have discussed today. Keep in mind that we live in an era where the historical scrutiny is greater than it used to be. And if you feel like it, why not sharing this video with them? Alright noble ones, well I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you are not yet members of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron, more unbiased, untainted content from the Metatron. Make sure to check out Squarespace in the link in the description to get your discount today. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.